Hello, welcome back to the second half of the North American program for Regeneration International's 2023 People's Food Summit. And today we are celebrating World Food Day with a trip around the world, meeting 40 farmers from 6 continents. And here in the United States, we had the excellent opportunity to work with the Real Organic Project. And so they had their conference on Saturday. So it's not live, but I'm here with you live and I'm in the chat with you. So give me your comments, I'll reply. And we're back showing clips of this. Our next speaker is Ariel Edwards. She works for the Real Organic Project. She's very young. I was so amazed. I've seen her talk already. She's just right out of college, basically, but she's already had so much experience as a farmer, as an organizer, and she has really insightful messages to share. So, Corey, let's go ahead and roll this clip.
So our next speaker is Ariel Edwards. She started with the Real Organic Project as an inspector just a few months ago and completely floored us with the way she won over farmers on the road. The knowledge that she came in with was superb. She worked for Jubilee Justice before coming to us, who does the systems of rice intensification. And then how quickly she's understood the complex concepts behind Real Organic. And I'm so impressed that she wants to come speak just a few months in. So we've just been so impressed with her. So Ariel, the floor is yours.
Hello. My name is Ariel Edwards. I'm coming to you from central Louisiana, where I live, and where I was mostly raised. I'll get into that later. But I've been on the road for the past week doing farm inspections, so this has been the big hurrah highlight of that entire process, and I'm always just inspired being on farms. And I am so grateful for this opportunity to speak about something that I'm very passionate about. And I'll do that through telling you my story of how I got connected to farming and agriculture by rediscovering remembering my identity, I would say, specifically in exploring Black land ownership and how it relates to all the conversations that we've been having today. And so growing up, one of the hardest questions for me to answer was actually, where are you from? Because my family had lived in 5 different states before I was 12. So my family unit really felt more like home than any single location. But eventually we settled in North Louisiana in West Monroe. And as a biracial Black woman, that was the first place where I was really confronted with my racial identity. I remember my first day of middle school, walking into the gym before the bell rang and having to decide if I was supposed to sit with the Black kids on the left or the white kids on the right. And that kind of carried on through all of my time in Louisiana, and as you can imagine, for a teenager, a lot of angst. And I spent a majority of my time in the wilderness alone, and dreamt of the day when I would leave Louisiana. And I eventually did. I wanted to study birds and conservation. I was a big bird watcher, still am. And I think at the time I thought if I went into conservation, then I wouldn't have to deal with people or questions around my where I belonged. Funny to think about that now, because very quickly I ended up in social sciences, and I became frustrated after a few years of classes hearing that humans were the villain, and also just realizing that I was one of the few Black and brown kids in my environmental science classes. And so it took a class on indigenous and place-based ecological knowledge. Shout out to Dr. Kareem Ali Kassam, who still inspires me to this day, to show me that food systems was where I was supposed to be. And the shy girl who spent all of her time in the woods, he had encouraged me to do interviews with people, actually in upstate New York, with hunters and fishers and foragers around how their connection to land was their connection to identity and food, and how they fed their community through food sovereignty and decision-making in an alternative food system. And he also taught me about place and sense of place and what that means. And very quickly, I realized that I wanted to go back to Louisiana. I took more food systems classes after that, and one specific day, we were talking about farmers around the world, and I remember walking out of that class and the question coming into my mind that I had never seen a black farmer or a farmer that looked like me in the US. And so I went to the library that day, and believe it or not, the first black farmer I met was in a library book of farmers throughout the Southeast. And the next book I picked up was Rooted in the Earth, and the next book I picked up after that was Farming While Black. And that rocked my world, because in the first couple of pages, all of the things that I couldn't put into words were just laid out. And so much of my experience was spelled out in those few pages. And so that night I wrote in my journal how I was going to get to Louisiana to reconnect with land and work with other black farmers. And there were many more signs that pointed me towards that. I remember seeing a video of a farm called Provost Farm in New Iberia, Louisiana, about a generational farm that was very successful, but the farmer almost lost his business after a rough year and being denied loans from banks and the USDA, and also being discriminated against by the local sugarcane mill. And literally within weeks of me seeing that video, I was in conversation with Conda Mason from Jubilee Justice about a new project in central Louisiana to start an organic rice co-op of black farmers throughout the Southeast and manage the farm as a response to this economic hardship and land loss. And 2020, COVID happened, my campus shut down, I didn't get to walk the stage, but I got in my car and I drove down to Louisiana and I became a rice farmer. And there I grew rice, as Lindley mentioned, in a technique called SRI, or the System of Rice Intensification, which is a dryland rice production technique that originated in Madagascar and is practiced by hundreds of thousands of farmers around the world, but not too much in the US. Really because it goes against a lot of what we think, or what conventional agriculture tells us, which is, high input and more is more. But this technique was all centered in less is more. Increasing the spacing, putting down young seedlings, and alternate wetting and drying, which really reminded me too of how cypress trees flourish in Louisiana. And my time with rice taught me that I belonged with the earth. My ancestry was rooted in deep ecological knowledge. Whether it was a story of Orza glaberrima, a species of rice domesticated in West Africa that, despite being a part of so many people's origin stories, only recently in the scientific community at the time had been discovered genetically to still be stewarded by maroon communities in the Western Hemisphere after bringing it over through the transatlantic slave trade. I also learned that SRI had been a way for farmers to reconnect with their ancestral varieties in many parts of the world after NGOs or companies coming in and telling them that their modernized GMO seeds were more productive. They could use this technique to show that their varieties that they had been stewarding for centuries could yield just as much. And I also learned that rice was one of America's first commodity crops, and that the foundations of America's economy were not just built on the labor of enslaved people, but the immense knowledge held specifically by the women of West Africa around building infrastructure, which you can still see along the coast of South Carolina today, and growing rice in tandem with ocean tides. So yeah, Rice taught me that I belong to land, and I loved being a farmer, despite how hot it was in the middle of the summer and how long the days were. But Rice wasn't my only mentor. I also learned about the resilience of my culture through all of the farmers I worked with in the co-op. One farmer in particular, he had lost access to his land through a heirs property dispute, but wanted to farm anyway as a pig farmer. And he told me how he used to haul pigs in his PT Cruiser because that's all he had at the time. To a rice farmer in Mississippi who I worked with, who, after learning about the ancestral techniques of growing rice, still use a lot of those infrastructural practices to this day. To groups of farmers who weren't farming anymore, but were interested in Jubilee justice before they knew they weren't getting the same prices as white farmers at the processing mill, so they wanted to be a part of the co-op in that sense. And I learned of just the general frustration with the USDA and the role that it has played in Black land loss after disproportionately denying Black farmer requests for loans for a very long time, which culminated in the largest settlement case ever in the US being Black farmers against the USDA, Pigford versus Glickman in '98. This later went on to Pigford versus Glickman 2 in 2008, and a more recent lawsuit against the Inflation Reduction Act, putting 17,000 Black farmers at risk of losing their land after false promises of loan forgiveness. Mind you, it's estimated that there are less than 50,000 Black farmers in the US. These were all very present forms of discrimination, which blew my mind that there are so many Black farmers that I was able to work with and connect with. Despite that, despite centuries of slavery, rural violence and massacres like the Colfax Massacre and Lee Street riots that happened in the town that I currently live in today and near, to rural gentrification and taking advantage of heirs property rights to push people off of their land, especially in Louisiana. And this has led to less than 2% of all landowners in the US being Black, dropping from 14% in 1920, which is crazy to think about. It's moved backwards very rapidly. And the amount of land loss just in the land value alone conservatively represents $326 billion lost from the Black community, along with a loss of culture and a knowing that it's our knowledge that created our practices and many organic practices. So how could Black farmers continue in a system like this? That's where I found my hope, and that's where I knew that I was where I needed to be, and I felt like I belonged in Louisiana. But still, I think it's important to recognize how this land loss and displacement of people has really fueled corporate consolidation, and a lot of what we speak towards today, my communities are being extracted from to fuel all of this, and that's why I think that it's so important to really center it in our conversations, because this legacy of displacement has led to mass incarceration, leading to convict leasing to fast food restaurant chains. There are imprisoned people working at the Sonic down the road, to food apartheid and not having the option to contribute your dollars towards good food, and many diet-related illnesses. And this is what fuels all of what we're trying to build a parallel infrastructure to. And addressing that is going to help all of us, no matter who you are. And I have hope. Last weekend I spent a really amazing weekend at a Saffron event in Mississippi with 20 young Black agrarians on land, and we shared our dreams. Some of us had access to land, many of us didn't. And we celebrated each other in joy and belonging. And my biggest takeaway from that experience was that the resiliency was there, and that we didn't center ourselves in pain, but rather an opportunity to support one another. And this is a trend that's happening. National Young Farmers did a survey last year that showed that 83% of young farmers stated their primary purpose as farmers was conservation and regeneration work, with nearly 30% of them stating that racial justice and healing was one of those main drivers. 74% of the young Black farmers surveyed stated racial justice and healing as their main drivers to returning to land. And I think that it's time to give that next generation an opportunity to do that. In the next 20 years of my life, half of America's farmland is expected to change hands. And I think if we want to show what real organic is and weaken the forces that are preventing our ability to make decisions for ourselves, then it's important that we make sure that land doesn't go into, isn't consolidated further. And I think there's also a lot of opportunity. For me, I was able to heal my relationship with myself and my ancestry on land. And a lot of these conversations we're having today are around our culture and remembering what good farming is and good food is. And I think that relationship can happen with all of us together, or that conversation can happen with all of us together. And exploring how our ancestries are linked. And being honest and truthful about this. And I think that's an amazing opportunity. And so I invite Real Organic Project to, and all farmers and communities, to not just consider the diversity of our landscapes, but the diversity of our movements, and how that is very much a measure of success, and whether we're moving in the right direction or not. Thank you.
Wow, Ariel Edwards with the Real Organic Project. She has only been out of school. She graduated from Cornell University in 2020. It's been 3 years, and she has launched a very impressive career in regenerative organic farming so far. So she's definitely one to watch. And I'm so glad she brought up all of these issues. It reminds me of the interview that I did with Tracy Lloyd McCurdy at our World Food Day broadcast in 2021. Tracy Lloyd McCurdy, she works with Acres of Ancestry. And the interview that I did with Tracy is called Black Farmers Matter. So I encourage you all to go back if you're curious about the issues that Ariel raised. I encourage you to find that interview. It's probably right where you're watching me right now, on YouTube for Regeneration International, or on Facebook for Regeneration International. It's also on the Regeneration International podcast, which you can find through all podcast streams. But these are live issues. I mean, Ariel talked about the Pigford case. That happened a long time ago, and the same farmers impacted by the discrimination at USDA have still not been given the debt relief that they were promised under the Pigford case. So there's an important film that has come out since I talked to Tracy. It's called Black Farmers in Search of Justice, and you can find it at Black Farmers in Search of Justice film. Right after during the pandemic in 2020, there was a huge bill passed to to funnel money into the economy to keep everything going during the pandemic. You guys might remember that. It was called the American Rescue Plan Act. And rolled into the American Rescue Plan was money for debt relief for the farmers who had been discriminated against at the USDA. And yet, to this day, 2023, these farmers have still not gotten the relief that has been owed to them and promised to them. You know, it's going on generations. It's really ridiculous, actually. And so this is still very much a live issue. This is also one of the issues that really could be helped by just a little bit of activism. We've done alerts on this, but I just encourage you all, hearing Ariel's story, call up your member of Congress and ask why the Black farmers who were discriminated against by USDA still, many of them have not gotten the debt relief that they were promised. You know, even just in the American Rescue Plan Act passed in 2020. It's been held up by lawsuits from white farmers who are saying now they're getting discriminated against because this is debt relief just for Black farmers. So it's ridiculous. But I feel like this is one of these issues that if enough of us stood up, it could be solved, because there are obviously people in government, people in Congress who have been trying to solve this problem. So we need to step up and support the Black farmers and make this happen. So thank you all for letting me vent. And thanks to Ariel for such an impressive presentation for someone so young, clearly speaking from the heart. All right, so our next speaker at the Real Organic Project Conference is Alan Lewis of Natural Grocers. Alan is a great friend of mine. Before I actually knew Alan, he was attending the Organic Standards Board meetings as I was, and there was a huge controversy over allowing synthetics in organic and then never being able to get those few synthetics out of organic, because during the Obama administration, they changed the way that the Organic Standards Board voted. So you have to get a majority of the board, a supermajority, a 2/3 vote of the board to allow a synthetic into organic. So that's good. That means that not many synthetics get into organic. But it was supposed to be easy to get the synthetics out of organic, because it would require a 2/3 vote again to keep the synthetic in after a 5-year period. So the idea was that organic farmers might need some non-organic materials sometimes, but that they could be sunsetted out so that it wouldn't just be a case of adding more and more synthetics every time the National Organic Standards Board meets, which is once every 6 months. So, so I was so frustrated by this issue that I staged a protest. The meeting was in Texas, and a bunch of local activists helped out with this. We did a big protest, shut down the meeting, and I ended up getting arrested. And it was Texas. And so I ended up being held in jail, and bail was required to get me out. I'm used to getting arrested at protests in Washington, D.C., where protests happen every day. And it's not very extraordinary, and it's easy to get out of jail. They don't hold you very long usually for a demonstration-related arrest. So bail money had to be raised to retrieve me from jail. And Alan Lewis, I learned recently, was one of the dear people who put money up to get me out of jail. So it's with great love and respect and honor that I introduce you all to Alan Lewis, speaking at the Real Organic Project.
Our next speaker is Alan Lewis. I met Alan before the Real Organic Project at the National Organic Standards Board meetings. And he gave my favorite description of the Real Organic Project as the last Jedi fighting the Empire. And he would know, because he is coming to us from understanding that food system so well. And when we had our first conference back in Dartmouth in 2019, the whole audience was just floored that this is the way it works. And I think the awareness about how it's worked has changed quite a bit since COVID and over the next 5 years. So see if you're as floored as we were when we first heard about it. Alan?
Thank you, Lindley. So Dartmouth, I got off the stage thinking I had failed to convince anyone of anything because it was rote knowledge to me in the retail food system just how, what's the appropriate term that's not a cuss word, messed up it is. And so weeks later, I was talking to Dave Chapman, and he said, no, Alan, kind of like what Lindley said, he said, you floored people because there were farmers in the room and advocates in the room and a lot of other people in the room who didn't understand how hard this is and why it's so hard. So Dave asked me to come back and go over this again, slice this cake again, and I'm going to put some frosting on it at the end as well. Since then, to put this in context, I have been kicked out of Google and the Google Food Lab for this speech, and I've been kicked off of LinkedIn by Bill Gates and Microsoft Corporation for this speech. And so I'd like everyone to pause and appreciate the fact that we are here, we're breathing, we're standing, we're well fed, and we get to speak to each other freely. So thank you, Dave. Thank you, Lindley. So 100 years ago, there were 100,000 local retailers that knew your grandparents, potentially knew your parents, Francis. And you could bring that food to the store. They could go to a small depot, pick up grain, pick up flour, pick up bread, and sell it in that store. 40 years ago, there were 30,000 in the natural foods business, which is your core retail customer. There's only 3,000 stores left, including natural grocers. And I'm going to throw in what seems like a pitch for natural grocers, but we're west of the Mississippi. Most people don't know us here, but it's keep coming up, this question of education. So the Isley family founded this about 70 years ago because they got sick from eating bad food, and they were determined to find clean food and whole foods for their customers, and they opened these stores. But in order to get customers, what do you have to do? You have to educate them relentlessly. So every one of our 170 stores has a qualified nutritional health coach that trains all of the staff and provides free coaching to the customers and maintains a science library. And we have a group of curriculum writers that develop a science magazine called the Health Hotline that's physically mailed to 500,000 of our subscribers 8 times a year, and we have 2 million people who've signed up to receive that electronically. That's what it takes to get people to pay more for better food that supports a food system and supports our society. I would love to brag about it. I've only been there 20 years. My boss is on 60. But it's really important to understand that that work is being done, and those 3,000 independent natural products retailers that I've just mentioned, they're the ones still carrying that banner. So we lost our retailers. They've all been consolidated. There used to be hundreds of big distributors regionally that would bring in quality food, move it around, process it, deliver it to other regions or whatever. That's collapsed. Imagine a big slide with a bunch of dots and hundreds of dots and 4 circles around it, right? Those circles representing the consolidation. The distribution is now down to 2 in the natural products, KeHE and UNFI, of substance. and a few dozen in the conventional, which is 95% of the business, and most of those distribution systems are run by the big retailers. Walmart, Costco, Target, Kroger, Safeway, you get the idea. But within that, there's 700,000 UPCs, stock keeping units, individual, unique products that are being tracked, that have adequate sales, that the tracking services know that they have sales. 10,000 of those are certified organic. Why is this so hard? In Colorado, 85% of food retail is by Walmart, Kroger, Target, Costco. The rest of us, Whole Foods, Natural Grocers, affiliated and associated, get the 10 or 12% that's left over. Why is this so hard? And for dairy, as we've heard before, it's even worse. Colorado used to have thousands of dairies. Now we have 100. We have one pooler, DFA, Dairy Farmers of America, which is the co-op, not a co-op. That absolutely controls the industry. Veterinary services, pickup service, haulage, processing, everything. So if you're not playing with DFA, if you're an organic dairy, a goat dairy, a cheesemaker, good luck with that. That's why it's so hard. We'll hear more from Zephyr Teachout about the anti-competitive issues. And I just want to place a seed with you all. Capper, Volstead, Capper, Volstead, Capper, Volstead. That's the original law from the late 30s that protected farmer co-ops, that the co-ops used to compete against each other and eliminate the competition, which is why we have one left. Trying to move on. About 10 holding companies control all the CPG brands that are out there. Same number of people are manufacturing all of the private label brands, like Natural Grocers brand, Kroger brand, Safeway brand, Kirkland brand. So imagine when I had my PowerPoint, I always showed a pickup, a red pickup, backing up to a loading dock with the most beautiful organic produce in the back, melons and peppers and cucumbers and greens. And I'd ask the question, in this system that I'm describing, what happens when you back up your best in that pickup to my loading dock? Well, the problem is there's no one at the store buying produce. There's no one at the store buying anything. Purchasing takes place in a global computerized system, now abetted by artificial intelligence, that is missioned to provide non-seasonal, standardized deliveries of products, including produce, milk, dairy, and meats, to maximize profit. There is no produce buyer to look at that pickup, smell your melons, thank you for growing local, and putting out a sign in the produce aisle that says, this is the best of the best. You really got to buy this. In addition, those handful of retailers that are buying all of these products on the global market, they're ordering electronically based on algorithms. They're receiving electronically based on a predetermined algorithm and computer system and tracking system. That's being paid for electronically and digitally. Sorry, Dave, it really gets depressing, I know. and there's no human intervention here. So bring that pickup to my loading dock, write out your handwritten invoice or an IOU, and ask me to buy it and pay for it. The system just has rejected normal human trade, normal community exchange of goods and services. In addition, everything you do is tracked We know you're here. We know where your cell phone slept. We know where your cell phone works. We know where you shopped. We know where you stopped before you shopped with us and where you're going to shop afterwards. We know that you're standing in front of the yogurt section in the grocery store so we can serve you a coupon for something full for Yoplait for your kids. The whole provisioning system for fresh produce in particular is actually run by the fresh produce associations. They know how much is being grown in each latitude, north and south of the globe. They know when it is greening and ready to be ethylened in transit to appear ripe when it hits the stores. They know whether there's too much or too little, when to set the price low and run promotions versus when to send out PR that says we have a delivery problem. You're going to pay more for avocados or bananas or lychee or whatever it is this year. That's all above our pay grade now. It's a system that runs under its own power and under its own logic. Hydroponics in particular, you're going to hear from Hugh Kent next, and we always tag team this thing. When you think about how hydroponics is being used in Mexico and Peru and the southern U.S. to decimate land, water resources, worker welfare, community vitality, it's astounding that we are willing to call those outcomes organic and those practices organic. We're going to see more of that in a bit. So what does the supermarket do? Supermarket sells real estate. We sell supermarket real estate by the square inch. This real estate, not so good. That real estate, not so good. Oh, this real estate, or in the cereal aisle, this real estate, right? The Fruit Loops, the Cocoa Puffs, whatever it is, the candy aisle. But every one of those square inches is fought over by the big brands, the big manufacturers, and internally the house brands, the private brands, because if it's there, it has a chance of selling. Back your pickup with that beautiful produce, that beautiful yogurt and cheese and meat. Back it up to that system, and the system doesn't even recognize that you're there except to give you a parking ticket or a boot. So the big organizations that manage the brands and the manufacturing and the provisioning for those factories, they are selling into retail hundreds, if not thousands, of individual SKUs, stock keeping units, products with UPCs on them. And in the past, there used to be a buyer, a category manager who would think through what our customer base wanted and fine-tune this or that or the other and decide and cut a deal with that person for that and this for that and that farmer here and that dairy here. What happens now is there's one great big easy button because you go to Kellogg's or General Mills or Hain Celestial or whoever and you hit the easy button because your system wants to maximize profit and efficiency. And the best way is to cut one contract or very few number of contracts, each with each of those big provisioners, and it shows up and it gets the shelf space and it's all done electronically. The idea that a grocery store or a conventional grocery buyer is going to go outside of that system to help the little guy, to support the local community, to avoid damaging Jalisco, Mexico, that would be a complete pipe dream. Okay, that's enough cutting of the cake. When I was on the original standard setting board for Real Organic Project, what I can't be thankful enough for that. Spending 3 days locked up with 14 farmers who knew their stuff and didn't let anything out of my mouth that wasn't challenged. That was quite the privilege, and I did okay. Towards the end, though, I called a pause and I said, let me tell you what I'm hearing that I don't think y'all realize. That the idea of organic agriculture in an organic farm takes place embedded in a community, in a business ecosystem, in an environment, and in a landscape. And the problem with big organic is all of those connections are broken. We have 10,000 square feet of lettuce in the Salinas Valley that's grown 4 times a year using immigrant labor. And is it organic? Well, the inputs may be, but the idea of organic being embedded in a community gets lost very quickly. And notice that all of this system that I'm describing not only doesn't care about those relationships and those codependencies, but it's designed to break every single one of them. So when you look across the heartland, rural America, with depopulated cities, with broken municipalities, with kids leaving as fast as they can because there's no opportunity and there's no life left in the town they grew up with, you see the result of the system that we're living in. So let's get back to Google and Microsoft. Oh, so butthurt. Kicked out of Google, kicked out of LinkedIn. So I was telling this to Reginaldo last night, and I'll warn you, when Regi does this, Alan, do you want to know the truth? Careful about saying yes. But Regi said, look, yeah, your voice was silenced in those venues, but it hurts because you think your voice matters. Your voice mattered to Bill Gates and the folks at Google Food Lab because it was part of a movement. It represented the power of everyone in this room. And just because I'm silenced here, or all of us are silenced any place in our life, doesn't mean that the voice of the movement is diminished. In fact, my story right now that I'm telling you should fire you up about being more vocal, more precise in your language, Abby, and more far thinking in the systemic effects of the world we live in, and how the Real Organic Project and its principles are in fact the basis for that. Let's not forget that when the system broke down during COVID, when the folks in Peru and India and Mexico either couldn't make the food that we buy or decided to keep it for themselves, who got in their pickup? People in the city got in the pickup. They drove out to your farm gate and said, hey, feed us, make us healthy. They drove out to you and asked for what you produced because they know intuitively, innately, inherently that what they're buying from the supermarket is sketch, and ultimately the real value in food and agriculture and community resides in the area around them. So I'm going to leave you with that happy thought, and again, thank Regi and Dave. And I believe in this. I believe we are building the future. I don't think that's a slogan. I don't think it's cute. I don't think it's funny. I don't think it's something to say lightly. I think ultimately when we talk about the principles that all of us believe in this room, it's going to be fundamentally important over the next generation that we hold steady on this. So thank you.
Very, very sobering talk from Alan Lewis of Natural Grocers at the Real Organic Project. There were 30,000 natural food stores And now there are only 3,000 independent natural food stores, including Natural Grocers, which is a semi-big natural food chain regionally. So, it puts it in perspective for the Real Organic Project, trying to get the produce of 1,100 Real Organic Project farms into this very automated, very opaque supply chain that they don't really have access to yet. And I think Alan leaves it open in this talk. He said that we are building the future, and it depends how we act today, what future we get tomorrow. So it's open still as to whether or not we will get Real Organic Project food into these supermarkets. But we have to think creatively, a consumer, a mom, somebody figuring out what's for dinner, you have to figure out where to get it. And if you can't get the good organic food that you want at your local grocery store, if you don't have a Natural Grocers near you, in my region, it's Mom's Organic Market. I mean, there are still really good independent natural food retailers. But if there isn't one near you, what do? Well, we go to the Real Organic Project, we find out what farms are certified in our area. And like you said, like we did during the pandemic, we get in our cars, leave the cities and find that farmer or figure out a way to get into a single farmer's distribution network. So that's a good segue into our next speaker's talk. Kristen Kimball, she's the author of The Dirty Life. I haven't read it yet, but I am extremely intrigued. This is my first awareness of Kristen Kimball. Kristen Kimball at the Real Organic Project. This talk that she gave really struck a chord with me. I found it very powerful. I hope you do too. But she has a really interesting story. She claims to have the world's first full diet CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, Essex Farm. And I just did a little research on Essex Farm. It is impressive. I was wondering, what do they mean by full diet CSA? Well, on her little farm, 600 acres, her and her husband and 10 full-time employees, they produce beef, they produce pork, chicken, eggs, 50 different kinds of vegetables, milk, grains and flour, fruit and herbs, maple syrup, and soap. Now that is truly impressive. Certainly we can, go to a farmer's market and get that, but there are very few CSAs that I know of that really are doing that full diet program. So she's impressive. Let's roll her talk.
Our next speaker is Kristen Kimball. I don't understand why people don't go and hear speakers like Glenn and Kristen speak in these huge stadiums, like everybody's going to see Taylor Swift or whatever. These are my idols, and they are incredible, and you could spend weeks with them and never stop learning from them. As a farmer, and all the farmers I talk to that have read Kristen's books, we read them and often are in tears because we relate so much to what she's saying. We all have our favorite stories. My favorite story, there's so many, it's hard to pick, but one of the ones that sticks with me is when it's so hard when you're starting out. So in The Dirty Life, the first book about starting out, she and her husband, Mark, have worked all day, and all they can do at the end of the day is fall over in their dirty clothes and just touch hands. Because they know in a couple hours they're starting over and they're doing it all again. And we're lucky if we get any of the food in our mouths that we're working so hard to produce. So I'll let Kristen inspire you more, but her books are a gem if you haven't read them yet. Kristen.
Thank Thank you, Lindley. That was the kindest intro I've ever gotten in my whole life, and I deeply appreciate it. Let's see here. So I'm going to do this very TED Talky thing and begin with this question. How many of you who are here today are making your living by farming, by selling food to people who eat it? Can you stand up? Can you just stand up for a sec? Awesome. I just want you to know that if your season was anything like our season, I don't have to ask you how you are. It was a tough one to grow food in the Northeast. The rain just didn't stop where we are. So I see you. I know what you've been through this year, and I appreciate you. And please keep doing what you're doing. And I have really good news for you for the next 18 minutes on the question of how to save real organic farming. You're officially off the hook. This is not your problem to solve. Partly, that's because it's a numbers thing. Somewhere between 1% and 2% of the American population works in agriculture. And like Lindley said at the beginning, about 1% of American farmland is in organics. And in real organics, that's a real tiny subset of that. So you are a subset of 1% of 1%. There's probably not enough of us to move the needle on anything. And at the same time, come on, guys, you're already doing enough. I ran into an ex-dairy farmer and real organic certified member at my kids' track meet in Vermont last week. And she gleefully told me, even though she's younger than I am, that she identifies as retired because after 18 years of milking cows, she figures that she has put in the same amount of hours as anybody who has done a full career. So you all are off the hook. But you know what I'm going to ask next. How many of you who are here today eat? Yeah. And how many of you purchase at least some portion of the food that you eat? Raise your hand. Yep. So just about 100%. And the problem of saving real organic is totally and entirely up to you. Doing it is going to require some effortful things from you. There's going to be some discomfort. There's going to be some inconvenience, and there's going to be some learning involved. But the good news is, I believe that if you do those things and make the effort, you'll not only be helping to save real organic independent farms and rural communities and the planet, but you'll transform your own life and your own health and discover a more satisfying way to eat, to engage with your community, and to live. So, my husband Mark and I sorry guys, can't figure out how to forward this. Good. Have been running Essex Farm for exactly 20 years as of this coming November 1st. Essex Farm is a full diet, year-round, free choice CSA. So we currently provide a full diet for about 150 people. And we produce beef, pork. I think, did I lose my slide there? Okay, I can't tell what slide I'm on, so. Okay. Beef, pork, chicken, lamb, eggs, vegetables, grains, herbs, and fats. And we milk anywhere between 15 and 25 Jersey cows for fresh, grass-fed raw milk and dairy products. And we produce some value-added extras like maple syrup, fermented vegetables, soap, and apple cider. For all of this, our adult members pay us $110 per week per person. and they get anything that they want to eat in any combination. They take what they want from what we have to offer. For members that can't pay full price as of this year, we tap into a donor-advised fund that was founded by one of our members to bridge the gap between the full cost of our share and what families of more modest means can afford. Our goal has always been to subvert the mainstream food system and make the grocery store obsolete for our members. And when our members are in, they're in. At $110 per week, most of the people who are living in our part of the world are spending their whole food budget on us. And it's a leap for them. It forces them to have to reframe the way that they think of food and shift from asking themselves, what do I want in the infinite range of the global food system for dinner tonight, to asking themselves, what's available right now? What is in its seasonal moment of perfection right now? Our members' refrigerators look very, what my kids would call sus. They have this very suspicious lack of labels, and their pantries are devoid of any of these packages with a colorful advertising on them. And there's not much in their kitchens that has passed through the maw of those 4 giant agribusinesses that hold controlling stakes in the majority of our food system. That guy. Now I know how to work it. So after doing this for 2 decades, we know that eating like this, locally, seasonally, from food procured from your local producer is possible. We know it's delicious. And our members tell us sometimes that it can be life-changing. As an agricultural business model, by selling this whole diet that's produced on one farm, we kind of stumbled on a way to scale a wildly diverse farm system into a business that can modestly support an independent farm family and its employees. And that's a really big thing. Trust me, we didn't know that that's what we were doing when we started out. But as we've seen throughout the last couple of speakers, nature loves diversity, but economies love monoculture. And in the last couple of generations, eating like we and our members eat, almost exclusively whole food, local and in season, bought from a local producer, that sort of diet has gone from so normal that it is completely boring to extremely weird and even radical. And there's tons of reasons for that shift. One of the biggest ones is that those 4 giant agribusiness companies and other ones like it, they want you to see real whole food as a garnish. And they're processed, profit-generating, packaged products as the main course. The pressure that those companies in our system exert to scale up and consolidate at all levels of the system, in production, in processing, in transportation, and distribution, that pressure in the last 20 years has become overwhelming. They spend more on advertising and marketing food in this country than any other industry except for the automotive industry. And as a result, we're starting to lose the plot culturally on what food actually is. A few years ago, we had a family visiting who had a 3 or a 4-year-old little girl with them, and it was June. So on our farm, that means it's strawberry season. Everybody gets really excited about it. And I wanted to entertain this little kid by taking her out to the strawberries and letting her pick strawberries. And I was very wrong. That was not entertaining for her at all. She wasn't from a farm family, so she didn't want to walk in the rows. She didn't want to pick the berries. And I understood that. She wasn't used to it. But what I found really alarming was that she didn't want to eat the strawberry. She didn't want to eat any of the food that we produced on our farm. Because at that age of development, kids will only eat what's familiar to them. And anything that's whole food to her was not familiar to her. So she became really hungry and really cranky, and eventually her parents drove her 40 miles north to the nearest McDonald's and bought her a Happy Meal. Completely lost my slides here, guys. I'm so sorry. Hold on. Here's a few more pictures of our farm. It's my husband, Mark. Here's my stock photo at Agribusiness. And look, it's really easy to vilify different players in this system. But large-scale monoculture and processed food, I think, are just the inevitable endpoints of food production in a purely for-profit capitalist food system. It's nobody's fault. It's no one player's fault, in the same way that gravity is nobody's fault. But as thinking humans with the ability to see the long-range outcome, we collectively have the power to divert that system, little by little, with every choice that we make. And that's where every one of us in this room comes in. We tend to think of that people eat what farms produce, but I've started to believe that that is exactly wrong. Farms produce what people eat. Farms produce what people will buy. If what people buy comes in packages or has run at any point in its cycle through the maw of those 4 big food companies, there is no legitimate place for farms like ours. There is no way that our farm could profitably sell what we grow into the industrial food system. So, if you don't want to buy what farms like ours produce and make it the mainstay of your diet and not just the garnish, we simply won't exist. What will flow in to fill our place? It's not too much of a stretch to say that almost all the good ground in America is in corn and beans, right? The ruthlessly efficient model of industrial agriculture is spray, plant, spray, harvest, repeat at increasingly enormous scale. There are no people on those vast acres. There are no communities, just a few very large and expensive machines. Meanwhile, the biggest chunk of the American food dollar goes for processed foods and sweets. So it's pretty simple. If what we choose to eat is narrow, our agricultural landscape will be narrow. When I think of the sameness of those fields that stretch for miles, the narrow sameness of our food choices, I get the same feeling that I get when I see the soulless sameness of American strip malls or replicated tracts of housing, or the aisle of a big box store that's the same in Arkansas as it is in Alaska. And I know that we have to muster an effort to change it. It's been a hard few months for us at Essex Farm. 2022 was devastating. And for me personally, it's not just farming, it's everything right now. My sister died at the end of June, and she was the person I was closest to in the world. And I thought that the last part of her cancer and her death would be the hardest part, but I didn't know enough about grief. Because there's this stretch of empty loneliness that follows that's much, much harder than the end. And over the summer, I really sunk into that empty loneliness. And at the end of August, because of that, we did something that farmers never do, and we went on a summer vacation. Mark and I have never, thank you. Mark and I have never both left the farm together during the growing season, and we did it. And we went for a week of canoe camping in the lakes and the woods of Ontario. And that time away that was disconnected from everything helped shift that grief a little bit. And it also made me think about food in a new way. We were in the Canadian wilderness in part, to retrieve our 2 daughters, who are teenagers now. And they had each gone on this backcountry canoe adventure with this awesome camp called Northwaters in Landskip. It runs out of Temagami, and their home base is right near us in Essex. And we boated out to their island at the end of the camp, and we cheered with all the other parents as the groups paddled in from their 10 or 20-day backcountry trips. And then we listened to their stories about navigating unpopulated lakes and rivers, portaging their canoes over tricky stretches of land, and setting up camp while they're tired or hungry or cold or wet or otherwise uncomfortable. We also heard about transcendent encounters with the natural world, new friendships, personal discoveries, rites of passage, and the joy of belonging that comes from working hard with a team of peers. Unspoken but evident, there was this collective relief that these young people had felt from being away from screens and Wi-Fi and having real-world, meaningful, unmediated experiences. And one good thing about grief is that it opens you up to everything. So watching those kids got me thinking weirdly about food, and specifically about the inverse correlation between convenience and satisfaction. Our current culture has made us believe that comfort is sort of the same as safety, and that convenience is something of great value, and that we should strive for the maximum amounts of both at all times. And while we've achieved the highest levels of comfort and convenience in the history of the world, we don't seem to be much happier. Watching those kids return from their trips with these happy, confident eyes and strong, healthy bodies, looking like those girls on horseback from the last speaker, it made me wonder, is real happiness even possible with too much comfort and convenience? It's uncomfortable to sleep in a wet sleeping bag, and inconvenient to haul your necessities over rocks. But these are things that most humans are capable of safely doing, and it's satisfying to have done them in order to see something or do something beautiful and rare and exciting or exquisite, or to learn something important about yourself. Likewise, we've come to believe that preparing whole food or eating locally and in season is insurmountably inconvenient. And it's true that it takes more time and forethought. But look what we end up with instead: the culinary anesthesia of processed food, which is fast and easy and sometimes even instant. It tastes pretty good if you don't pay too much attention to it. Food scientists and ad executives get a really big fat paycheck to make you think it tastes good. But the truth is, it's bad for us. It's bad for our communities. It's bad for our planet. And if you pause to really taste it, you realize that it offers you nothing except a quick dopamine hit from the carefully calibrated levels of salt and fat and sugar and flavor. These are simulations for real foods, in the same way that screens are simulations for real experience. And while they can be gratifying and distracting and addictive, they're never really satisfying. On our way home, we drove past this large clearing where the shady old Canadian forest had been torn up and the trees had been cut and hauled away. And there were these ugly piles of stumps among the ruts, and piles of rock at the edge waiting to be cleared. And we knew that this spring it'd be ready for the plow, and that the forest was being destroyed to make way for more corn and more soy, which is the fuel for most processed food and all factory meat. We can imagine a different and healthier landscape, but it would require a different, healthier consumer. One with a tolerance for some inconvenience, with an appetite for more complex flavors, and a willingness, of all things, to chew. I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, and I hope you'll allow me to manhandle this analogy for one more minute. Independent consumers who base their diet on whole food, in season, bought from a local producer, are the key to the survival of independent farms. Without you, there's no reason we need to have an alternative to the mainstream food system. You're the culinary canoeists, willing to portage over steep terrain in order to access the deliciously quiet lake. You put effort and resources into sourcing food that's not convenient. You trade infinite choice for the natural limits of regional climate and season. You have to acquire some knife skills. You have to develop your ability to chew. You have to tolerate the limit of season and climate and take the time to find food that isn't being advertised to you. And then you have to take it home and put significant work into turning it into meals. If you don't do that yet, please do. If you do it, please teach someone else to do it. Why should you go to that effort? Because real things are more satisfying than simulations. Because effort in the right direction is almost always rewarded. Because your body and your spirit orient you to what's good as surely as the needle points north, as long as you can be quiet enough to sense it. Your job, when you leave here today, is to tell more people about this, to give them knife skills and the will to cook and taste and chew. Because without more of you, there won't be farms like us. Thank you.
Man, what an inspiring call to action. I'm really at a loss for words of anything to add to that. Yeah, the one thing that, I think she gave the best call to action that you can give for being the consumer who goes to the farmer's market or finds a CSA or drives out to the farm and cooks what's there. I mean, challenge yourself to cook something in season at the market or available from your local farmer that you've never cooked before. It's super fun. Like she said, challenges are rewarded, hard work is rewarded. So yes, I don't want to just repeat what she said. It was so eloquent. But here's another thing. I think a lot of us who are not farmers, listening to all of these Real Organic Project farmers, listening to the farmers from around the world who are featured in today's Regeneration International World Food Day celebration, a lot of us non-farmers start to have farm fantasies. And we're like, if only we could move, if only we could buy land, if only we could buy animals, if only this, if only that. And we start to fantasize. And the fact is, there is a farmer like Kristen within your range. Somebody, if you don't know somebody like Kristen yet, there is a Kristen Kimball in your city or within driving range. And if you think, I can't get out to a farm. Well, the markets are in most cities. And even if you don't have a car and can't get out of the city to a farm, you can volunteer at the farmer's market. The farmer's market needs volunteers. Your farmer who comes to the market needs help at the market. It involves getting up really early, helping people check out, etc., bag stuff up. It's a great little job to take on once a week at the market that's most convenient to you, that you can reach through public transportation. I mean, it's a great way to become the farmer, to live out that farm fantasy once a week, see what it's like. Another way to be the farmer before you have a farm is to go volunteer on the farm. Thanksgiving is coming up. That's a lot of turkeys that need to be processed. Where I live, the farmers are allowed to do it on their farms, but it's a big job. It requires a lot of hands, and you can volunteer to help out on the farm, process the turkeys. Pulling potatoes. My coworker Corey Melby, who's doing the video behind the scenes today, he said that his wife and daughters were out pulling potatoes tonight for dinner. He sent me pictures of really funny looking potatoes. And, it's like, it's beautiful to grow your own potatoes and pull them yourself, but it's also beautiful to go to a local farm this time of year and help pull potatoes, because there are a lot of potatoes that need to be pulled out there right now. So think creatively. If you have a farm fantasy, think creatively about how you can have these experiences without having your own farm. There is a lot of work to do. Farmers need help. They will welcome you volunteering at the market or the farm for them. All right, so we are almost to the end of the North American piece of the 24-hour World Food Day People's Food Summit broadcast. And we get to bring you one more speaker from the Real Organic Project conference that happened on Saturday this past weekend. The last and final speaker that we can bring you, but you can go to Real Organic Project and get videos of this entire day-long conference. The last speaker we bring you tonight is Dave Chapman, and he is the other director, along with Lindley Dixon, of the Real Organic Project, co-founder. He farms in Vermont at Long Wind Farm, and it is a very unique soil-grown tomato operation in Vermont. Now, tomatoes, they don't have a really long growing season in Vermont. So he has a 1-hectare glass greenhouse operation, and it produces a lot of tomatoes, way more than he can distribute through farmers markets or CSAs or direct to consumer sales. And so he is a soil-grown tomato grower in Vermont who needs retail operations to get his tomatoes out. And the trend towards soilless organic nearly put him out of business. And that's one of the reasons why he had to do this work of the Real Organic Project. So he's exactly the type of farmer we need to support. He's a real movement leader. Not only did he found Real Organic Project, he's a co-founder of the Vermont Organic Farmers Association. And he co-founded the campaign that started Real Organic, the Keep Soil in Organic campaign. So let's hear from Dave Chapman.
Dave and I actually swapped roles. He normally tells the depressing story at the beginning, and so now we're counting on him to tell us the story of hope right now. Dave Chapman.
Lindley's right. I am normally the person who does the first part, and frankly, it's much easier to create outrage about what's going on. And now I have been tasked with creating hope about what we can do. And that's not so easy for me, honestly. I told Rehi that I was not an optimistic person. He said, never say that out loud. So what can we do? This is something that came up. I spoke at a rally in 2017, and it was before there was a Real Organic Project. We were still Keep the Soil in Organic. And I was describing all the terrible things that were going on. And somebody called out, what can we do? And honestly, I froze, and my heart sank, and I thought, God, I don't know what we can do. And I said, you can write a letter to the USDA. And I was writing a lot of letters to the USDA, but I knew that that was a fairly hopeless task. So I have spent the last 6 years trying to come up with a better answer. And this is what I've done. I've learned a lot of things from all the speakers, and not just today. In Zephyr's book, she had a really interesting description of the difference of the activism of Henry David Thoreau and Martin Luther King, and that they both practiced civil disobedience, but they had a somewhat different intention. And for Thoreau, it was really about living a life, a public life that was in alignment with your inner life, and making sure there was integrity there. And for King, it was all of that, but it was also about taking actions that would further a cause of transformation. So he was seeking a public transformation, not just a personal transformation. And I think that that's an important difference. The Real Organic Project, you know, all the farmers could have taken the Thoreauvian path and said, you know, I'm going to live the life I believe in, and I hope that it benefits the world. But we actually are an attempt to organize ourselves and see if we can change a greater reality. I want to make clear that when I say ourselves, I'm speaking of everybody in this room, right? We are all the Real Organic Project. Even if you hadn't heard of this 2 weeks ago, you were already part of it, but now you're really trapped. Yeah. It's like there's no going back. And this is not something that Lindley or I or a small number of farmers do. It's something that a lot of us do. So I have to actually come up with actions that you can take. I'm sorry. I'm going to start by talking about a little bit of the thing from Thoreau's perspective. This is so lovely to have birds singing. So from Thoreau's perspective, what can you do just in your personal way for your life? And the most obvious one is to eat well, which is wonderful. It's generous and selfish all at the same time. And if you can, grow a garden. It can be enormously transformative, even on a large scale. In World War II, the Victory Gardens supplied a third of the vegetables that were eaten in America. So if a lot of us do this, it's a big deal. If we only do it for ourselves, it's still a big deal for us. Make sure you eat real organic food. So going back to Kristen, we need to be activist eaters in order to have activist farmers. None of this works without eaters. And God forbid I should ever call us consumers ever again. And I won't, because Abby's absolutely right. It is important, the words we use, how it changes how we think. So we are people who eat, we are citizens. And as we take responsibility for that and make choices about what kind of food are we going to buy? Bart said earlier at a workshop that you know, if we just ate real food, even if it wasn't organic, it would be a huge achievement for addressing a lot of the ills of this country. So that's right. And if we ate real organic food, then we're going much, much further, because it addresses more even than questions of personal health. You can ask, cajole, insist that the places that you do buy food from carry real organic food. And that's a big deal. I have practiced this. And you go to a store and you say, you know, is this food really organic? And it does change. You'll have some very interesting conversations. And that's your personal song. I think of that as a song that we all sing. But there's been a lot of talk today about choirs, you know, preaching to the choir, joining the choir is on fire, you know, and it's right. And it's what happens. There's this magic when we start to connect and we start to become a choir instead of just a single person. because I talk a lot this way or that way, people have said, aren't you just preaching to the choir? And I say, it is a big choir. So I'm happy to preach to the choir. The choir has millions and millions of people in it. If we could ever get that choir to sing in some kind of harmony, we would take over the world. You know, that's the truth. If you go in, thank you. If you go into 5 stores a month, try this, just one person, if you went and did that, and you asked them, are these tomatoes, are these blueberries hydroponic that are certified as organic? Or if you asked, are these eggs, these certified organic eggs, coming from a CAFO, from a confinement factory like we saw pictures of? They won't know the answer. They probably won't know what you're talking about, and they will probably think that you're a strange person, maybe even a wacko, right? It's like, okay, I'll see if I can find out, right? That's singing a song, but what if we all did it? What if everybody here went to 5 stores, and I will give the introverts an out. What if you wrote a letter, right, to 5 stores in a month? And if we just did it for 1 month, I'm just curious, like, how many people go, well, maybe I would do that. I just want to see, am I alone, you know? Thank you for making me not be totally alone. So if we actually did that, and I don't know how many we have now, but we started with 200. So that would be 1,000 times in that month that stores would get these strange questions. And if we did that for a year, that would be 12,000 times that they got asked that question. Do you think that they would ignore that? Because I don't think so. Now, I understand that this probably won't happen, but it could. We all could do that. And what if we all got 5 friends to join us and do this? This is not like, well, that could never happen. That could happen. We could all get 5 friends who said, okay, I'm going to do this. We could have a little letter writing club, and once a month we get together, have a potluck, and send out our questions. And what does that put us up to? 60,000 letters that year? 60,000 letters to the stores? I think that we would see something happening. And that's just from this nucleus. Can you imagine if we started to do that in the whole country? We are preaching to a big choir. I just wanted to say that 94 million Americans chose to eat some kind of organic food in 2020. It's the last year I could get. 1/3 of Americans try to buy organic food when they can, and more than half of Americans think that organic food is better for their health. And they're right. That's a lot of people. There are millions more in Canada, millions more in Mexico. The EU is huge. And what about China? We've been approached, Real Organic Project has been approached to see if we would set up a Real Organic Project in China. And we said, we don't have the resources for that, but you should do it. That's how this works. This is grassroots, and we'll help you. But there are millions of people in China who are desperate to find real organic food. They have certified organic food there, and they don't trust the government. And they're right not to trust the government. So there are millions of us around the world, and what if we all got together? You know, what if we were able to get past our sense of defeat or hopelessness or apathy, whatever the things are that lead us to not act, to accept things that we really don't want? What if those millions wrote to the USDA and demanded immediate reform? We win. There will be immediate reform. It only took, I think 300,000 to get the nasty 3 thrown out when they set up the National Organic Program. And they wanted to include sewage sludge and irradiation and what was the third one? GMO, right? And 300,000 people wrote and said, don't do that. And they immediately were like, okay, we can't do that, right? Well, imagine if 1 million people wrote and said, we don't want hydroponics to be certified as organic. We don't want confinement livestock to be certified as organic. We would win overnight. What if millions of people wrote to Congress and said, you know what? We aren't going to just vote with our wallets. We're going to vote with our votes. Right? All of a sudden, people are getting nervous. Right? We're going to see changes. I understand this is not easy to actually do, but we can see that there's a path there. So if you're going to do this, you're going to have to educate yourselves and I don't say this pointing a finger, I have to educate myself. I'm a very fortunate person. I get to talk to like so many wonderful, educated, informed people from this part and that part. And if you want to follow that, it's all recorded and it's all on our website. And there are 140 interviews there, and they're well worth listening to. So I really think that we can. Somebody came to interview me who was writing a book on the agricultural movements that had grown out of the counterculture. And I was amazed at how knowledgeable this person was. I mean, he really knew a lot about what we were talking about. And it turned out he'd listened to all the podcasts. And I thought, wow, that really worked. Our movement needs to be connected. We need to be connected to each other. We have to find ways to do that. It's been very hard in the age of COVID, but we're coming back again now, and we're able to meet together. We need to be connected with the land around us. We need to be connected to people who are actually quite far away and land that is actually quite far away. And we need to build a movement, as Ariel said, of genuine diversity, of young and old and white and black and rich and poor. We're all in this together. We all want the same thing. I have to speak about silence. Some people say we will hurt organic if we speak up. This has been a real plague upon our house. And I understand it. People were like, if we talk out loud about these things, we will damage organic. If we talk about the corruption in the USDA, we will damage organic. When I interviewed Michael Pollan, he said, and you will damage organic. You're right. He said, but if you don't speak up, it will destroy organic. So we have a tough choice, but we have to do it. The code of silence is not our friend. And I hate the phrase circular firing squad. It's one of the great phrases of people who don't want you to speak up. Oh, that's just a circular firing squad. No, it isn't. It's like, first of all, I'm not shooting at anybody, although I feel like I got a few shots in my back. But it's also true that the people I'm disagreeing with basically don't agree with me. They have a completely different concept of what good food should be, of what organic should be, and they're in a tiny minority, but they have tremendous power. And that's why we need to speak up together. We get it backwards when we think we can protect organic with our silence. Let's protect it with our loud and joyous voices. I am not an optimistic person. But as Vincent Stanley said, and Vincent is Yvon Chouinard's nephew, and he was the marketing manager of Patagonia, and he's one of those 140 people that we got to interview. And he's such a kind person, but very insightful. He said, a sense of agency is more important than optimism. I'm going to say that again. A sense of agency is more important than optimism. And the example he used was Uncle Yvon, who is a complete pessimist, doesn't really like people, and would prefer to be alone. And yet he did a great deal to change the world in ways that he hoped would be helpful. So I think we need to find our sense of agency. We don't have to be optimistic about it. We just have to be committed to try and create some change and to know that we do have the power to do something here. There are 6 true things that I think can guide us in our sense of agency. 1 is that we are limited by our fear. 2, if you aren't confused, you aren't paying attention, right? You should be confused. It's pretty confusing, and there are people who are very good at confusing us who are doing it full time. 3, no one is coming to save us. We have to do that ourselves. 4, we do not need anyone's permission to act. 5, the hour is late. Time is short. We need to act now. And 6, we did it before, and we can do it again. So other people said all these things today, except for the last one. Probably Elliot's going to say it. But they're all true. And we need to think bigger. And this is a little hard for me. You know, it seems hard enough, the little stuff that we're trying to work on. When we started, we were about creating reform of a few rules in the USDA and the way they're interpreting them. And as I got into it, it became bigger and bigger. The issues became bigger, and they started to be connected. And I was like, well, this isn't just about hydroponics. There's all this confinement livestock I didn't even know about. And what's this grain fraud thing? I didn't know about it. And then what's going on? Why is this so hard? Why are these things that we all agree on and the whole world agrees? There's a whole world movement. We're the only country in the world that has this kind of fraud and this battle going on. And we can look to them for inspiration and hope, but they're looking to us to do a better job because we have so much influence in the world, we, the United States of America. And it's going to be up to us to try and fix that. Some people say that organic can only succeed if we build a big tent. I don't know if you've heard that phrase, but it's very popular in the organic industry. Build a big tent. We need to build a big tent. We need to invite everybody in to create the change. And who they basically invite in is Godzilla and Gorgo, right? And they sit down at the table, and guess what? We're going to eat whatever they would like to eat. You know, they have so much power. And so I'm not against big companies doing the right thing, but I am against us losing our vision because of them. And I'm happy to have them come in, but I prefer they check their gun at the door, which means they can come in as people, but don't come in as Monsanto, right? I'm going to go over time. I'm sorry. Since 2010, the USDA to find what we want to find. This has allowed Herbrooks, it's an egg company, in a single facility to produce 10% of the U.S. certified organic eggs in a single facility. That was according to the Washington Post. It has allowed Driscoll's, the biggest berry company in the world, to provide 70% of the certified organic berries in America. And that is Driscoll's own claim, not mine. Dominate the certifiers, the distributors, the stores, and the government. And that is why it is illegal. I say it again, monopolies are not illegal because they threaten consumers with higher prices. We, the citizens of America, made it illegal because they threaten democracy. They threaten us as citizens. And that's why we should enforce those laws and break cut it out. It's illegal there now. Same time that we were saying, come on in, we, the USDA. They do not allow industrial scale CAFOs. What's the outcome of that? In the last year, EU organic sales surpassed those of the US. They're growing faster. Organic is growing faster in the EU than it is in the US. And this just, they're if we can't keep it really cheap, and the only way we can keep it cheap is by cheating, and we got to have these industrial livestock in order to do that and have the cheap milk. And guess what? They're not making it so cheap there. They're following the standards, and it's growing. And the things that we want to have grow are growing, not just the name organic, but the reality of organic. The European Union passed an initiative that they called Farm to Fork. It's a pretty visionary attempt to transform the world. And just to put it simply, they have committed to reducing the use of chemicals in agriculture by 50%. I'm talking about in conventional agriculture, their goal is to cut the use of chemical inputs by 50% by 2030. And in the same time, they want to increase the percentage of certified organic farmland to 25% of their farmland. This is a radical proposition, and this is what the government has come up with. And the countries are actually working to achieve it, which is pretty amazing. By the way, the USDA fights this tooth and nail around the world. They hate this, of course, and it shows who they're truly aligned with. Let's talk about Denmark. Paul Hawkins said, you can't talk about Denmark. It's different. Well, why not? Why can't we do it in Vermont if we can do it in Denmark? Right? It's a small, enlightened state. So the Danish government has committed $150 million to support organic farming. It's a little country. That is $22 from every citizen. Everybody in the country pays $22 to support organic. That would be, if we did it in America, that would be $7 billion committed to supporting organic. They did it, why can't we? Right? Over there, organic certification is free to all farms. 5% of Danish citizens visit an organic farm every year. The government does all this because they believe that all citizens benefit from organic agriculture, not just the ones who choose to buy organic in the stores. And they have lots of ways in which they're trying to promote this and develop it. I already ran out of time, so I won't go into it. Holland, the Dutch government has committed $53 million for organic market development. That's only about $8.50 for every citizen. Again, if we made the similar commitment, that would be $2.9 billion in the US. So if we want to be more moderate, we could just, set aside $3 billion to promote organic agriculture. Instead, you heard about from Ben how we're spending it on climate dumb agriculture. Same amount, $3 billion. But it is possible to create change. We just have to find the way. We have to think bigger. We have to enforce the antitrust laws that we already have. I think that until we limit the power of the corporations, we're not going to be able to change the government. And I don't think until we can do that, we will be able to change the marketplace at scale. And we can't enforce the antitrust laws without a movement. There was an interesting discussion in the policy thing about, well, should we focus on changing government or should we focus on building the alternative system? Real Organic is primarily focused on the alternative system, but we ultimately can't do either unless we build a movement. And if we build a movement, we can do both. So my own answer to the question, what can we do, has been to work with other farmers to create the Real Organic Project, which did not exist 5 years ago. This was so simple, so obvious as to now seem naive. An organic standard based on the law? It's a good law. Enforced? What madness, right? But we're doing it. Right now, our tiny organization with 10 people on staff, no overhead, no offices, and we don't charge farmers anything for certification. And we have 1,100 farms we've certified. We've created a joint venture with Naturland that was talked about. They're very, very trusted internationally, highly respected. They're an add-on label like us. They certify 140,000 farms around the world. Pretty amazing. We put out a weekly letter read by thousands. We hold conferences like this one. We have 140 podcast interviews. Those are listened to by thousands of people every week. We have a new website coming out tomorrow. I hope you enjoy it. I hope everybody goes to it. So we're just constantly talking to farmers, to eaters, and we're listening and we're sharing. I think of us as the watering hole where everybody goes. We're the dating service where people who are good farmers can get connected to eaters who care. The last thing I'll say is that we need to come together. We need your help in any way that you can. So for some of you, you don't have any money, you can't help with that. So find somebody who does have some money would be a great help, right? That's okay, you know. And for some of you, you can donate and support this. We work on a shoestring budget. But when I say we, I truly mean we, right? Some of us are doing this for a living and like Ariel's traveling around the country, going to all these farms and talking and listening and talking and listening, right? And she's one of whatever 5 of us who are doing that. So we do need some money, but we need your creativity. We need your resourcefulness and your good thinking. There's a lot of it here. We need your network of friends. We need you to forward every letter to 50 people. All of a sudden, we have a lot more people reading the letters. So that's enough. I'm so far over my time. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Wow, thank you, Dave Chapman of the Real Organic Project. It was such a pleasure to get to work with them this time for World Food Day to make them the featured event of the North American program for the People's Food Summit. So thank you so much to the Real Organic Project. Yeah, Dave really gave us our marching orders and he laid it all out. There's not too much to add, but I have an idea. We should all seek out real organic farms near us. Not only can you find them on the Real Organic Project website, but you can also find them on the Regeneration International and Organic Consumers Association websites, where we have a regenerative farm map. So you can search for Real Organic Project farms there. And let's make a commitment to seek out these farms, figure out a way to connect with them. And here's how we'll know if it's making a difference, if we're getting people engaged with Real Organic. Use the hashtag #EatRealOrganic. I just checked, nobody else is using that. And it makes sense to me. So buy your good food from the farmers that you love who are real organic, especially the ones who are organizing through the Real Organic Project, using the Real Organic label. Seek out those farmers, buy food from them, cook it up, and share it with your friends and family. Let them know this is real organic food. Let them know what the difference is between real organic and supermarket organic. Organic grown without soil, organic grown in factory farms, organic processed into multi-ingredient foods that contain lots of synthetics. Real organic. Teach your friends and family through the food. Everybody loves food. Get good at cooking it, share it, and tell the story when you share the food. And then post on social media. And that way we'll be able, take a picture. Everybody likes to take a picture of the beautiful food that they cooked. So use that hashtag #EatRealOrganic, and we'll see if we're making a difference for real organic farmers. So to close out tonight, Corey Melby, my coworker, using this behind the scenes. He has a few cool videos for you. One features Andre Loy, the executive director of Regeneration International, along with Vandana Shiva, one of our founding members. And then we've also got a video for you on glyphosate, a little reminder of why organic matters, why this movement needs to succeed. We cannot get watered down. We cannot get to the point where consumers don't trust the organic label, because this is what differentiates us. This is the movement that enables us to separate ourselves from the Bayers of the world, the Monsantos of the world, and make a movement that will eliminate pesticides, chemical fertilizers, factory farms for good. So stay with us for the videos, and then join us for the Latin American program of the World Food Day, People's Food Summit. So that will be starting at 8 p.m. Central Time. So stay on with us. It'll be a new feed, so you'll have to go back to the homepage where you're watching at Twitter or Facebook or YouTube and find the new link for the Latin American program. Continue with us on this journey around the world. Happy World Food Day. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
We came up with the word regenerative. It's not a corporate invention. Please don't get mistaken. It's a movement language to continue to talk organic, now as regenerative organic, showing that regeneration is working with the living earth and her regenerative powers of a living soil, living biodiversity. We cannot hand it over to the corporations, because I've read every paper they've published, from the Syngentas to all the others. They use our language about what it is, and then what they're doing is about hyper-industrialism. I don't think if we hand over regenerative, we are strengthening our movement, we are weakening our movement, we're handing over what is ours. Yeah. So we've got to reclaim regenerative, show that it's the same as organic, the same as agroecology, and depending on the circles and the spheres, use the words that are popular in that sphere. But don't give up regenerative, define it more deeply.
This is a global farmers' revolution. It has not been hijacked by Syngenta or Bayer. I know that because I'm on the front line. They're trying to. We always knew this day would come, right from the beginning, because we saw the way they, we've got industrial organic in the US, and that's divided the whole organic movement, despite the fact there's standards and certification. We've seen a similar thing here in Europe with agroecology, and agroecology put out by the French government, for instance, which is business as usual with a light wash of green. They're experts at hijacking, and we knew as soon as we became successful, they would want to hijack us. That's a sign of success. That's a sign that we're a threat. Now, very importantly, the opposite of regenerative is degenerative, and by definition, any agricultural system or any system that degenerates is not regenerative. We actually need to regenerate our biodiversity, our democracy. In other words, we start talking about the bigger picture of regeneration. It's not just farming and soils. It's people and planet.
For regeneration. Yes. All right. Well, this has been so fun. So great to be here with you on World Food Day for the People's Food Summit. And it's not over. I mean, it's a 24-hour thing. It's been going on since before I woke up this morning, and it'll go on late until the evening. The next stop is Latin America. That starts at 8 p.m. Central Time. And really exciting stuff happening. Our Mexico team is very much involved in putting this together. And you'll get to hear about how Mexico has decided not to have glyphosate anymore. And they don't want America's, the United States, glyphosate soaked genetically modified corn. So this is an awesome, awesome opportunity for North American solidarity around regenerative organic agriculture. So stay tuned. You're going to have to join a new link for the Latin American program starting at 8 p.m. Central. But please do that. We need this solidarity movement to make this happen. As Ben Dobson said in his talk for the Real Organic Project, the United States was not too happy about Mexico deciding to ditch Monsanto, now Bayer's glyphosate and GMO corn. And they're putting a ton of pressure on Mexico. And we need solidarity amongst the farming movements of both countries to make this happen. It's going to take farmers in Mexico, and it's going to take farmers in the United States working together to increase the amount of regenerative, organic, glyphosate-free, non-GMO corn. So it's going to take all of us. So get yourself informed, get involved in this movement, stay on for the Latin American program with Regeneration International's People's Food Summit. Happy World Food Day. And I'll be here watching with you. Take care. See you soon. Bye-bye.